First thing, can you just briefly introduce yourself and tell us what brought you to your current work and what you do now?
Of course. Well, my name is Ricky Ruiz. I am a state representative for House District 50, which covers the city of Gresham and a small portion of Southeast Portland. Currently, as I mentioned, I'm a current lawmaker for the state of Oregon. There's 60 state representatives, 30 senators, and I get the honor of being one of the state representatives. Kind of my line of work is mostly focused around the education system. Before being a state legislator, I was a school board director for 5 years. And so education is my bread and butter and enjoy doing policy work. And now I am tasked to be one of the co-chairs and figure out the budget aspect of education in the education system. Aside from being the lawmaker, I also work in the Gresham Parks and Rec Department. My job there is mostly parks development, contracts with CBOs who are interested in working with families and youth in Gresham, and I've been doing that for 9 years.
And do you mind just sharing a little bit about what brought you to run for office?
Yeah, well, one of the first reasons I ran for office was based on a 2016 election. I just had graduated college in 2016, and one of the things that I was really committed to was figuring out how I can go back to my community, the same community that I grew up in, to give back. And about 6 months later, there was an opening for a school board position through an appointment process. I applied. I didn't end up getting the appointment process, but I did run for re-election in late 2017, and with the whole purpose of ensuring that we were securing our schools, making sure families were had someone who spoke their same language, who looked like them, be able to protect their kiddos when they were in school, especially among a lot of different talks were happening around, President Trump at the time, and threatening deportation and immigration issues. So that led me to be a school board member, and we really focused on policies and ways to protect vulnerable students and their families as well. So pretty proud of that. And in 2020, ran for the state legislature with the purpose of just doing the same work I was doing in the school board. As a school director, I found out that we only were able to do as much as we could with the budget that the state allocated. So my goal was one day I will want to be in the legislature to ensure that we are providing more resources to school districts like mine. So that's what led me to the legislature.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Of course.
So the next question is this year's reconference. The theme is renewal. How do you practice self-renewal or self-care in your work? And in moments where progress seems really difficult or uphill, what renews your commitment to that work?
That's a beautiful question. Renewal and how do I do self-care at work? It really looks different every time, every week, every day. It really depends on what's going on. I think the most common thing for me to do is I try to kind of leave a little space throughout my day to either, just meditate, be able to read, go on a walk, or, when my daughter's back from preschool, call my family and hear her voice. That renews me. It just reminds me of what I'm doing. It grounds me to the ground again, and it just gives me energy and re-energizes me to renew the work that I started doing from the morning and ensuring that I'm delivering throughout the day and night. And honestly, one of the things that sometimes we as legislators face is sometimes we get, hurdles that we have to just navigate, and things get more difficult. But just finding community, finding colleagues, finding community members who align and who are pushing the same way I'm pushing makes me feel reassured that I'm not the only one going through this, right? And I honor and appreciate folks kind of aligning in that aspect, and just the more hands, or the more strength that we have towards a movement, potentially the easier it will be for us to carry that weight. So I always rely on that, and it just gives me more energy to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that community is really important, and you're not the only one who suggested that that's how you keep finding that commitment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that next question is just what's a common misconception about the field you work in, and how do you work to address it?
Yeah, I think there's a common misconception about being a lawmaker is, we're always fighting. There's always, this, and you see this on the news and the
Mm,
newspapers, right, or clickbaits, that we're always fighting back and forth. But over 90% of legislation that is passed in the Oregon legislature is bipartisan. And that I think is a testament of relationships that we've built. I will speak for myself. The relationship I built, the communication I've built across the aisle, and just ensuring that we're really trying to pass legislation and budget allocations that are reflective of Oregonians, no matter where they live, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from. I think it is critical for us to just align that way and serve that way. I feel like that's a very common misconception that we are always fighting, but the news and the media would only highlight the things that we are butting heads about, right? And that's what's what people like to see, right? And that's what gets media the views, but over 90% of legislation is bipartisan, and it gets done in a very respectful and meaningful way. And even the stuff that we don't agree on, most of the time it's always done in a respectful way, and that's I think what makes our body so unique. And it makes me want to continue to serve because I know I'm serving along folks that have some respect, that have most of the respect, and even if we disagree, we can have a conversation on the side and ensure that we clear off any miscommunication that we've had before.
yeah, I appreciate that, and I think if you were to ask the average person how much do people agree in the state legislature, they would be like, not very much. And then
Mm.
I think that that's probably true. And I think that there is a way in which what feeds the kind of news cycle is the division, right? Because it's
Yeah,
when you need a conflict to make it an interesting story.
yeah,
This everybody getting along should be more of a story, but it's unfortunately not sometimes. And is
yeah.
there anything you do just out of curiosity to try to kind of correct that misconception in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I try to share, legislations that we've passed before that has Democrats and Republicans, right, aligned with it. And I try to always, when I have town halls or I have coffees with constituents, right, I try to invite folks who don't align with me, so folks can understand and see the process, what the legislative process is all about. So I always try and educate my community and letting them know, like, you and I are not going to agree 100%, but there is one thing we probably will agree, and let's work on that. And whatever we can agree on, let's find some common ground, right? And so I'm always an open book. I always have an open door policy, and there's a reason why folks, no matter what party affiliation they align with themselves in, they feel comfortable speaking to me about an idea or a concern, and I listen, and if it makes sense, we work with it. And if it doesn't, then we don't, right? And we always keep it respectful.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Respect is important. So,
Mhm.
so the next question is, can you just share a recent success or breakthrough in your work that really energized you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think for me is just being appointed to being one of the co-chairs for the budget committee for education. Like I mentioned before, my work as a school board member was really around working around what the state was giving us in regards to funds, and I always would tell myself, "Man, why can't the state give us more, right? Or well, how come there's more cuts, or how come they're investing in this?" Now I'm in that position to lead in those conversations. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, that was just a breath of energy of just like, wow. Like I remember in 2018, 2019, how I would tell myself I was manifesting that I wanted to be in that role. And now here we are a couple years later, right? So that is energizing. I'm having such great conversations, such difficult conversations as
Mm-hmm.
well, around what, the K-12 budget should look like, what the community college, public university, early childhood should look like, right? And I come from a prevention background, so I always believe if you invest in the kids now, you will probably have less issues in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking that to heart and just advocating as much as I can, and that just fuels me to the fullest. that I am in that position to have these conversations, be able to be in meetings with the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, even the Governor, and I'm being listened to. And I think that is the beauty of it. And I bring the voices of my community. I bring the voices of school districts that are in rural Oregon and urban Oregon, in areas that maybe didn't have a voice before, and ensuring that they have a voice in this process, and hopefully we have some good results by the end of 2025.
I hope so too.
Yes.
I know it's an issue a lot of people care about. So
Yeah.
In terms of the money going into the schools. So great. Well, so last kind of question is, how do you see the landscape of racial housing and economic justice in Oregon evolving, and what role does your work play in that evolution?
Yeah, I feel like in the last 4 years, there's been a very strong push on addressing racial disparities among housing, economic justice, healthcare, education, right? And I think it is really critical that we, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a task force that was created. It's called the JARDO Task Force, the Joint Task Force in Addressing Racial Disparities in Home Ownership, and multiple recommendations came out of that task force, and we're proud that we're passing some of those recommendations in a bipartisan way, right? And that is reflective of the work that we did in the task force. I joined the task force as a freshman legislator, and I co-chaired that task force along with Senator Manning from the Eugene area. And you'd be surprised, folks' concerns in Eugene are very similar to the concerns out here in Gresham. And we got joined by Senator Weber, who represents Tillamook. Those same concerns were also relevant there, right? So we're seeing the pattern, and I think there was such great recommendations that came out of that task force that we're continuing to use that blueprint to ensure that we are still honoring the work of the task force, and we are introducing legislation, hopefully passing legislation that makes sense moving forward. So there's still a lot to do. A lot of those colleagues that were part of that task force will still be there. So I'm just eager to continue and honor the work of that task force and ensure that we are doing our part in breaking down racial disparities among housing and home ownership.
That's great. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I know that the Housing Alliance has also prioritized some of the things coming out of that task force. So
yes.
Yeah. Well, that's all of my questions. Is there anything else that you want to add, or anything that didn't come up that you think that would be great for people to know about?
No, these were all great questions. So no, I appreciate this. And if there's anything that I can do, just let me know, and we'll jump in the Zoom call again.
Okay. Hang on, I'm just gonna stop the recording.